The next presenter is Vikas Joshi, works as a staff engineer in the plan review team of the Plan and Technical Review section. Vikas completed his Bachelor of Science in Chemical Engineering and received his Master of Environmental Engineering from the Texas A&M University. Vikas is a licensed professional engineer with over 17 years of experience in water, groundwater, remediation, and underground injection control related programs. Vikas worked in the in situ uranium mining industry for over 15 years and has been at the TCQ for approximately 2 years. Let's welcome Vikas.
Good afternoon, everyone. So the topic is successful as-built submittals. So typically, in a public water system, all system components are required to be approved by the TCQ prior to any construction. Now, there are some cases where TCQ approval is sought after construction has been done. So we'll cover which public water systems need to do an as-built submittal and what's required for a successful submittal. Okay, so public water systems required to do an as-built submittal. So we broadly put them in 3 categories here. Number 1 is public water systems with citation for not submitting plans before construction. Now these systems have gotten a citation for an unapproved system component. So this is by far the most common submittal that we get as far as-builts are concerned. A lot of times these submittals get disapprovals. Engineers are not sure what to be submitted, and oftentimes they are inadequate. So that's the whole point of this presentation. Number 2 is newly discovered public water systems. Now, these systems are operating without approval. And when they're discovered, one of the first things that happens is enforcement is started. And we assign them a PWS ID. And then one of the first things we'll approve is emergency disinfection system. And then we look at other components in the system. And number 3 is public water systems grown to meet PWS definition. Now, these systems, to begin with, did not meet the definition of a public water system, but may have recently crossed the threshold of 15 connections or 25 people. So now they're doing an as-built submittal. Now, what are the main components we are looking at when you're doing an as-built submittal? Well, it begins with cover letter. We get a bunch of cover letters where the engineers don't tell us they got a citation or what they're seeking approval for. So when you take a shotgun approach and basically throw everything at us, reviewers are left guessing. And when we are left guessing, it is not good for you to get approval. So please be very clear in your cover letters what you're seeking approval for. Please be very clear in stating what's as-built and what system components you are proposing for construction. And then engineering report. In engineering report, basically, we're looking at public water system description, system background, population to be served, what would be your estimated water demand. We need to see engineering calculations for your various system capacity requirements, how you meet them. Also, narrative of plant infrastructure. We'll talk more about engineering report in the coming slides. And then next is as-built site plan. So please very clearly label what are as-built components, what are proposed for construction. So that should be stated and labeled pretty clearly in your plans. So in a lot of submittals, we get checklists submitted as is. So the whole idea for checklist is for you to be able to assemble your submittal. You know, a lot of times people would check boxes on the checklist, and we see that in the submittal. So we're really looking at you to be addressing every single item in the checklist. Provide us information, provide us relevant information, not the checklist. Also on specifications, we would like to see specifications for any proposed items. If you have any as-builts, don't give us specification on that. Let's say you have an as-built well. We don't need specifications on an as-built well. We need to see how the well was constructed. So your engineering report should tell us how the well was constructed, how it meets the regulations. And also, all documents need to be signed and sealed by a Texas licensed professional engineer. And proposed item, this is how we come into compliance. So items may be proposed with as-built information to bring system into compliance. Let's say a system is short on certain capacity requirement. They don't meet pressure tank capacity, and they're proposing to construct an additional pressure tank. So they may propose to construct one, and then your cover letter should be very clearly stating what's as-built. If you have a pressure tank or any other component that you're proposing to construct, state that very clearly. Again, plans need to label very clearly what's as-built and what's proposed. Again, no checklist, but address every single item on the checklist. It provides us relevant information. Every single item should be addressed on the checklist, supported by color photographs. For proposed items, we don't look at photographs. They are proposed, but for pictures become very important when it comes to as-built submittals. So information in engineering report. So we'd like to see any copy of citations that you have gotten from the region. We need to see public water system description, any background, what's the total number of connections of people being served. So your engineering calculations should show how do you meet those capacity requirements. And then narrative of all water plant infrastructure. So narrative has to be item specific. So if you have an as-built well, address every single item on the checklist, provide us information, provide us photographs on that. We would like to see equipment documentation, manufacturer information. We need to see nameplates, model numbers, serial numbers. If you don't have nameplates, provide us purchase orders. And then specific information on each type of facility. If you have an as-built well, we want to know your casing meets AWW requirements. We want to see basically every component of the well: concrete sealing block, casing height, flow meter, casing vent, pictures of everything, even screens in the casing vent. So we'd like as many pictures supporting the documentation that you're providing, and color photographs of all equipment, like I said. And on photographs, we get a bunch of photographs, but they are not annotated. So really important that your photographs should be annotated as to what item is being conveyed. It should be noted in your engineering report. Let's say you have an as-built well that you are seeking approval for. So you should refer to the storage tank checklist and address every single item. And like engineering report should say, for example, you have roof access opening. So it should say picture number 6, look at roof access opening, and it should have tape measures showing what is the size of the roof access. If you have roof access collar 4 inches, see picture number so-and-so. Same for other items that we're looking at in the checklist. Pictures should be large, in color. We get a bunch of pictures that are out of focus at bad angles. So make sure your pictures are at good angles and in focus. Otherwise, it can lead to delays in reviews. Also, can result in disapprovals. Now, as-built wells, we need pretty much every piece of information you have on the well, starting with the State of Texas Well Report, cementation report. We do have a TCEQ cementing certificate, so engineers should fill that out, submit that information, and then a detailed map looking at well coordinates, any property boundaries within 150 feet radius of the well, any property owners. We need all that information. Like checklists, we would like to see concentric circles with well at the center, with different radii starting from 10 feet all the way up to quarter-mile radius. So any potential hazards, any existing hazards, we need all that information provided. And then public water system ownership information. So who owns the property? If there are any other property owners other than the system itself, we would need that information, recorded property deeds, pump test information. It should be in accordance with approved staff guidance. We are looking to see all the details on the pump test. Typically, it's a 36-hour pump test, but for higher flow wells, we do approve shorter duration pump tests. We would like to see BACT raw water sampling analysis. So the sample should be taken on 3 consecutive days. They should not be very old, typically looking at within 6 months of your submittal. Chemical analysis, so we have a bunch of parameters that are listed in our checklist. So sampling analysis should be done for all those parameters. If your well happens to be in a county where radionuclide analysis is required, that should be done as well. That information should be provided. You can also refer to Drinking Water Watch, and you can use chemistries from there to include in your submittal. And then well pollution hazard survey needs to be signed and sealed by a PE. We're basically looking at any kind of hazards in the vicinity of well. So there shouldn't be any septic tanks or any storm sewers, sanitary sewers within 50 feet of the well. If you have any underground storage tank, any transmission lines carrying any liquid chemicals within 150 feet of the well, we need all that information. If you have such hazards in the vicinity, like the ones I mentioned, or you have a sewage treatment plant within 500 feet of the well, that would require an exception. And so we're looking to see all that information in the submittal. Now, public water system ownership information. So we would like to see recorded property deeds. We would like to see if there are any other owners within 150 feet radius of the well. We want to see who the owners are. It should be shown with property boundaries. And if the system doesn't own the land within 150 feet of the well, they need to get sanitary control easement from the property owners. And if there are any roads or right-of-ways within 150 feet of the well, we would like to see right-of-way easement that should be obtained by the system. If you can't obtain any of those easements, like sanitary control easement or right-of-way easements, an exception will be required. If the system doesn't own the land under the well, then it triggers the question, who owns the well? So in that case, there has to be at least a long-term contract that gives access to the well to the system. Lease, it should be a long-term lease which gives access to the well, water, and land to the system owner. In absence of such agreement, the property owner will have to become a public water system itself and basically become a wholesale supplier to the other public water system through an interconnection. Okay, so raw water sampling is more on that. So as I mentioned before, we're looking to get back-T analysis. So the sample should be collected on 3 consecutive days, and samples should be collected within the last 6 months of your submittal. Now, it should be done prior to any disinfectant addition. In your analysis, there should be a check for chlorine. There shouldn't be any chlorine in the sample. Disinfectant concentration should be at 0 milligrams per liter. And then chemical and radionuclide analysis. If your well happens to be in a county where radionuclide analysis needs to be done, you'll have to include that analysis. And then you can refer to Drinking Water Watch also for getting recent chemistries from there. Now, photographs of an as-built well. So we're looking at photographs colored, and they should be annotated. Your AWW casing that extends at least 18 inches above the elevation of finished floor. We're looking at a concrete ceiling block that extends 3 feet in every direction from the casing. Should be shown with tape measures. And then using carpenter's tool, you can show us the slope that's no less than 0.25 inches per foot. We do want pictures for the casing vent and also the pictures for the screen, 16 mesh or finer corrosion resistant screen, and then blow-off assembly. We discharge pointing downwards. We want pictures of that for sampling cock. For flow meters, we need all those pictures. Now, exception case, if you happen to not have some information, like you don't have well report available, or you have a well report but it has an unapproved cementing method, or there's insufficient cementing depth, all these instances would require an exception. We would need exception for well completion data if you don't have any. Pressure cementation. Pressure cementation is very critical in a water well or any kind of well. So if your cementation is not deep enough, so typically your well should be cemented to the top of aquifer being produced from. Now, typically that would be top of your screen. So well should be cemented to the top of the screen or top of the aquifer being produced from. If it's any shallower, that can trigger an exception requirement. If your cementing is not thick enough, your cement sheath should be at least 1.5 inches in radial thickness. If it's any less than that, that would trigger an exception request. If you have used any unapproved cementing method, that would require an exception. If your cement slurry is not thick enough, you did not use enough cement bags that would also require an exception. So all these are, cases where the system would be required to get an exception for pressure cementation. And casing material should be AWWA standards. It should meet that. All exception requests must precede submission of plans. So typically, exception approval takes around 100 days. And after you get that approved, you submit your plans to plan review team. So before you have to submit your exception request to technical review and oversight team. It can be done all electronically at our ptrs@tceq.texas.gov website. We need written request with documentation, include exception request form, site regulations that you need exceptions for, and typically all exceptions come with conditions that systems need to comply with so as not to compromise public health. Here's a little exception flow chart. Basically shows that you make a submittal for exception request to TROT, and then if TROT disapproves, and then you have to revise it, address any gaps in your initial submittal, and come back with resubmittal. And in case TROT approves it, the next step is to submit plans and specs to PRT. So we do look at water chemistry very closely. In a lot of exceptions, you will be required to do a lot of extra sampling. So some of the common exceptions: well setbacks to pollution hazards. If you have any hazards in the vicinity of the well, like I mentioned before, if there's a septic tank or a sewer within 50 feet of the well, that would trigger a requirement for exception. If any underground storage tanks for any maybe gasoline or transmission lines within 150 feet, that would trigger an exception. So sanitary control easement, if the system is not able to obtain any sanitary control easement from any landowner in the vicinity within 150 feet of the well, you will require an exception. Improper cementation, shallow depth, insufficient thickness, or unapproved method of cementation, not enough bags of cement used, that all can trigger exception request. Innovative treatment technologies. If you're using any technology other than RO to treat an MCL, that would trigger an exception. It would trigger an innovative treatment technology exception. As-built tanks, information required. We would need coding system details for all kinds of tanks, whether it's pressure tank, ground storage tank, or elevated storage tanks. We want information, and we focus mainly on interiors, especially when was it last painted? What was it painted with? Did it have any lead in there? So if you don't have that information, it will require an exception. The coding system, the paints should be NSF 61 certified. If it's not, it will require an exception. So we want to explore as much information as possible. We will need size, dimensions, material of construction, any documentation of construction that you have, photographs of nameplates, vents, openings. We need pictures of access panels, vent screens, and ladders, handrails, and inside walls. We would need all those pictures. Now, all these tanks, whether it's pressure tank or ground storage tank or any elevated tank, they're required to be inspected on an annual basis. Inspection can be done by water system personnel. It can be done by contracted inspection service. We would need to see those records. When you have any such tank for as-built submittal, provide us those annual inspection records. Now, any storage tanks that do not meet AWWA standards, that will require an exception. Or if you have any pressure tanks that are greater than 1,000 gallons that do not meet ASME certification, that would also request an exception. Pressure tanks that are less than 1,000 gallons, we also look at that they should meet 4:1 safety factor requirement. So let's say your system pressure is 225 psi. So your maximum working pressure should be 1/4 of that. If your working pressure, you cannot meet that at 1/4, you'll have to set your pressure relief valve at that pressure. So just to make it meet the 4:1 factor requirement. Information on as-built pumps. We would like to see motor labels, pump labels. We'd like to see pump curves showing us duty points at what's your capacity flow rate, what's the total dynamic head, what's the output pressure. We need to see all that information. We need documentation that the pump meets NSF 61 certification or EPA's low lead requirement. So we need one or the other. But I would say the best way to ensure that your pump meets EPA's low lead requirement is to have it NSF 61 certified. As-built chemical feed systems. Again, we need a bunch of information on that. We would like to see the safety and data sheets. All chemicals need to be NSF 60 certified. Give us the size and number of pumps, day tanks that you have, bulk tanks. We would like to see injection points, sample points, and monitoring plan should include all sampling points. If you're using chloramines, provide us nitrification action plan. We would like to see sampling taps, especially when you're using chloramines, you have chlorine addition and then you have liquid ammonium sulfate additions. We would like to see sample taps before any chemical addition, after chemical addition. We'd like to see the sampling tap between the two chemical additions. We need it shown on your plans. We would need to see photographs of those sampling taps. Photos to verify all items and sizes. I'd like to see engineering calculations for sizes of pumps and tanks. So your bulk storage should be adequate enough to hold 15 days worth supply of all chemicals. So that should be included in your engineering calculations. And then as-built distribution systems, information required. So we would like to see distribution maps along with your portable water lines. We would like to see any wastewater lines, any crossings, distances. We need all that information. Hydrant pressure and flushing records. So rules require that all dead ends should be flushed at least on a monthly basis. So we would need flushing records to see that they have been flushed on a monthly basis. We need all those records to be submitted. Again, we would like to explore as much information as we can. We want the repair records, any purchase orders, photographs of pipes, valves, and appurtenances. And then subsurface utility engineering records. If you have any utility lines passing under your property, if you have any gas lines or any other utility lines, provide that information. Operator interviews on types and condition of pipes. We'd like to see some pictures with potholing, showing us photographs of pipes, what depths the pipes are at, what are the different types of pipes. Provide us as much information you can, but definitely what's listed here should be provided. So here are some useful TCQ websites. When you're looking to submit plans, you can refer to these links and checklists that are often used depending upon what is the item that you're looking for an as-built approval for, and forms, requirement for wells. If you happen to be in a county, you can look it up, whether you'll be required to do radionuclide analysis. It's listed in there, in our checklist also. And then what you need to do for requesting an exception, those instructions are there. And Texas Drinking Water Watch, pretty useful, handy website. If you can use data from there to include in your chemical analysis. If it's recent enough, you can use that in your submittal. And then here's some very often used checklists, depending upon what you're looking to get approved for. And every submittal should come with the latest edition of plan review submittal form. If you're a new system, you'll be required to fill out core data form. So new systems that do not use the latest edition of any forms typically can get rejected during admin review. So make sure you're using latest forms and addressing everything on the checklist. Really important. A lot of time engineers think, I've included the checklist, checked all the boxes, but we're looking for the information, how you're addressing those items. That's what's important, that's what we're looking at. Here's some other available resources. Pretty handy tool, Texas Water Development Board's groundwater database. Some links for if you're looking for NSF certified chemicals. If you're looking for any information on NSF certified system components, you can use all those resources. And with that, pretty much covered what I had to cover for as-builts. If you have any questions, here's my contact information. If you want to reach out to me anytime, here's my email address, my phone number, and we can take any questions if you may have.
Yeah, I was going to ask about the bleach, having the NSF 60 certification.
Yeah.
On the bottles that we use, it says NSF, but I saw you had a website up there that probably tells you that also. But that's my question is, how do you know if it's 60?
So
NSF?
manufacturer information should have it, right? The certification, you can get it from your manufacturer, who you're buying it from.
I order it offline through, it's a Pure Bright. I don't know if you ever heard of that brand. Pure Bright. It says NFS.
Yeah.
If it's a bleach, it's 60.
Okay.
Just a quick show of hands. Curious, how many people have done as-built submittals here, or looking to do one? Okay. As-built submittals. Okay. Yeah, it's not, a lot of engineers not sure, because that's why they often get disapproved, because, submittals are not adequate. So, but I hope this was useful, and you can always reach out to me if you have any questions. If you have any more questions.
Well, that concludes this session. Let's thank Vikas, and
ma'am. Thank you.
please stay for the next one. Thank you.